Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Impact7 and today I'm going to be doing my spoiler review of Star Wars The Last Jedi. I saw the movie last night. I really enjoyed it. It was very good. I'm going to go through my positives and negatives and then give my overall score at the end. So let's get right into it. So first of all, I'm going to start with Luke Skywalker. Now, Luke is a very interesting character. I really liked what they did in this movie with him. He was very affected by what happened with Kylo and his Jedi school that he tried to make. It was very interesting getting the backstory of what happened between him and Kylo. At first, we find out that Luke tried to kill Kylo, but then later on in the movie we find out that he did, but then he had second thoughts about it. But unfortunately for him, he was standing over Kylo and he activated his lightsaber, but even when he was thinking about not doing it, Kylo had already woken up and saw him ignite his lightsaber, and obviously if anyone standing over you with a lightsaber, you think they're going to try and kill you. So obviously Kylo took it that way and he basically defends himself. So it's very interesting that all that situation, you could say, is just a misunderstanding, but it's unfortunate that in addition to the fact that Luke could sense the dark side rising in Kylo, for Kylo to actually fully go to the dark side because of this misunderstanding was something that was very interesting. Aside from that, when Luke finally, because Luke, while he's been on the island, hasn't been using the Force. He's locked himself away from it basically, and it was really cool seeing him the first time he actually uses the Force again. It was very interesting, very cool. In this movie, there are quite a few Force abilities that are introduced into the universe of Star Wars. I don't know whether they've appeared in comics or books before, but this is the first time I'm seeing them. Now, the next one is Rey. Rey, I feel, is a very good protagonist for this trilogy and possibly any future movies that are coming down the line. Rey, I like seeing her training with Luke. It was very nice and cool to see. She showed an array of emotions, no pun intended. Whether it's she's struggling to find her place in the world, that she says, or even trying to convince Luke to train her, it was nice to see. And there were quite a few funny moments between Rey and Luke, particularly when he does agree to train her and he's basically given her a quick run through of how to use the Force, how to communicate with it, and he says something along the lines of, now reach out, and we knew, me and everyone else in the theatre, that he didn't mean that literally, but Rey puts her hand out and tries to feel it, and Luke has I think it's like a piece of grass in his hand, and so he was touching her hand with the grass, and she could feel it. She's like, do you feel it? Do you feel it? That was funny. That was really funny. So I like that banter between the two characters. It was refreshing to see. And then further, it was throughout the entire movie, there was this connection between Kylo and Rey, where just out of nowhere, they would suddenly be able to communicate with each other. I'm not too sure whether they could see each other's surroundings, but it was to the point where they could actually physically touch one another, whether it be a handshake or in Kylo's case, when some water was sprayed onto Rey, Kylo actually felt it, and when he rubbed his face, you could actually see the droplets of water running off his hand. So that was very interesting there. I'm not too sure if that's ever appeared in a Star Wars before. That will link up to the Force ability that I'll talk about a bit later with a particular character. But moving on from that, we have Kylo. Kylo, just like in Force Awakens, has a temper tantrum, particularly after he gets a strong talking to by Snoke. Kylo is a character who's he's conflicted. There's a scene where he has the opportunity to kill Leia, but he doesn't do it. You've seen the scene in trailers where he's in his ship and he has his thumb over the trigger, but he doesn't do it. But for me, there's two highlights for me when it comes to Kylo. Number one was when he's able to take Rey to see Snoke in what appears to be his throne room, and he has his guards standing behind him. I think it's maybe 6 or 8, one of the two, and 6 or 8 guards. And while Snoke is goading him to kill Rey, he has her kneeling down, and Kylo standing over her with his lightsaber. He proceeds to impale Snoke with the lightsaber, which is laying next to Snoke. He's able to use his hand to force manipulate it, and he ignites it as well, and it slices completely through Snoke. Basically, he gets Darth Maul treatment, and you just see him flop to the ground, sliced in half, which was pretty cool. And then straight after that is a fight with Kylo and Rey versus the Snoke's guards, and that was really cool to see. I think that's pretty much the only real lightsaber battles, because the guards had weapons that were similar to lightsabers, but it was nice to see Kylo and Rey fighting together, and you could clearly see the difference between the two in terms of their combat experience and combat abilities, where Kylo looked completely comfortable in the combat situation. He was up against like 3 guards at once, and he was doing his thing, slicing guys' heads off, parrying and then counter-attacking with precision. Whereas Rey, you could clearly see that she was just starting to, she was just a beginner, let's say, with the combat. So you could see even just against one guard, she was struggling. But ultimately, I really enjoyed that. And then the second one was where he goes up against Luke. Now, as I already said, as I said earlier on, you get to find out about what happened as to what really led to Kylo leaving Luke's Jedi temple and basically destroying it. So it was nice then seeing Luke standing in front of Kylo, and Kylo trying to go at Luke, but Luke displays a pretty incredible Force ability. He's able to project. It could be like an astro projection, let's say, where he's in one place, one far off place, the island that Rey found him on, but yet he's able to project himself into a physical form to the point where he can talk to people and he can interact with them. Like, he's able to appear in the Rebels base where they have their final stand, let's say, and Luke is able to communicate with his sister for the first time in I don't know how long, decades at least, and he's able to hold her hand, he's able to kiss her on the forehead, and then he's even able to how do I say this? Basically, he's able to, I guess I'd say, manipulate Kylo, where his whole plan, Luke's plan, was to buy time for the rebels to get away. But one of the things that I found interesting was the fact that where Kylo and Luke were, I guess you could say, fighting. It wasn't really a fight. I mean, Luke barely swung his lightsaber, but where they were fighting, it looked like salt flats, where you step on it and the crust moves, and then there's like a sort of like a red substance underneath it. So when Kylo was stepping on it, it would leave like a red footprint on it. Luke, on the other hand, when he was walking on it, nothing happened. It stayed the exact same as if he wasn't even there. So that was a clear sign that something was amiss. But the way Luke was able to move, the way he was able to dodge Kylo, really showed the gap in ability. I'm pretty sure everyone can guess that Luke is far superior to Kylo, and the only reason why he is Kylo, I mean, even alive, is because Luke not only cares for him, but couldn't bring himself to do what may have been necessary. Leia. Now, I liked Leia in this movie. She's a motherly figure to the rebellion. She's the general. She has a lot of respect from her subordinates, let's say, and even when she's incapacitated, she's still able to inspire them to carry on and to not give up. Leia's able to display an ability which is kind of surprising to me. Clearly she has a connection to the Force. She's a Skywalker. She's the son of Darth Vader and Anakin Skywalker, one of the most powerful Jedis in history. So you can expect her to have some sort of connection to the Force. But as I said earlier, Kylo had his thumb on the trigger, and it was targeting the bridge that Leia was on. He doesn't fire, but his two companions, let's say, do fire. So it blows up the bridge where Leia's on and the commanding officers of the Rebel Alliance are. And so obviously Leia gets sucked into the vacuum of space. Now, I'm pretty sure all of you are aware that if a human being gets basically thrown into the vacuum of space, you freeze and you suffocate. There's no air, it's freezing cold, you're dead. Well, that doesn't even apply to Leia, because somehow she's able to not only remain conscious, but she's able to somehow use the Force to pull herself back into the ship and pose there to open the door for her to let her in. Now that was a bit weird. I'm like, hold on, wait a minute. She has a connection to the Force, which obviously you've seen evidence of that for, like, where we saw her react to Han Solo dying, or when Kylo Ren was in his ship about to shoot her, she could actually sense that Kylo was there. Or when Luke finally decides to use his Force abilities again while she's in a hospital bed, she's able to pick that up, and she says Luke, and Luke says Leia, so that they have that connection. Now, that was surprising to me. She's never used any sort of actual force abilities herself, like a force push or something like that. Even if it was just like she could lift up her cup of tea or something. Okay, fine. At least it would be like a foreshadowing that she could do something like this. So this was a bit weird to me, a bit surprising. However, I want to quickly say that it was very nice to see Carrie Fisher, I believe her name was, the woman who portrayed Leia. I had the same feeling I had when I watched Fast and Furious 6, I believe it was, when Paul Walker just passed away. So that was a lot of nostalgia for me. I'm not a big fan of Star Wars. However, I do understand the meaning of Star Wars and how it has permeated throughout history. I mean, Star Wars is a really old franchise, and yet it's just a monster, a beast in society right now. I mean, it's at what, at least 3 decades old, and yet it's just destroying box offices around the world, making a ton of money. And it's gotten to the point where wherever Star Wars appears, when it comes to release dates, every single major movie needs to jump ship and bail. Case in point, Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman is probably DC's biggest success right now in their DCEU. Don't know what they're going to call it now, but I believe Wonder Woman was set for December sometime. Not entirely sure of the date. But then Star Wars came along and said, we're going to be in December. DC, quick as you like, we're moving to November straight. They didn't even wait a couple of weeks. They just, nope, we're moving. Which clearly shows the power of Star Wars. Then we have the droids. R2-D2, C-3PO, and BB-8. All three very funny. It was really nice seeing R2-D2 and Luke meeting up again when Luke snuck onto the Millennium Falcon, and so it was nice seeing Luke back on the Millennium Falcon after so long. And it was also nice to see Luke and R2-D2 get a few moments to chat to one another. That was nice. And R2-D2 gives Luke a bit of a pep talk, as it were, because he's able to replay a message that Leia recorded when she was younger. So that was cool. C-3PO was funny. He had a couple of funny lines. BB-8, as usual, very entertaining, very funny. They've been able to figure out a way to come up with creative but also very interesting ways to have BB-8 in a couple of situations where he may not necessarily have been in otherwise. But overall, I really like the droids. It's nice seeing C-3PO and R2-D2. Then we have Yoda. Yoda portrays, I guess you could call it force ability, but it's, as we all know, Yoda's dead and he's a force ghost. And we all know that force ghosts can communicate with people who are alive. Okay, totally cool. What I didn't know was that they could actually affect the things around them. For example, Luke, after Rey leaves to confront Kylo, Luke goes to a tree which is on his island, which apparently is a Jedi tree, where inside are old books that teach the Jedi way. and he goes there to burn them, to basically destroy the Jedi Order. Throughout the entire movie, he talks about how the Jedi were over fantasized and built up to be something that they're not. So he goes to the tree. He has like this fire thing to destroy it, and he gets there. He's standing in front of it, and he just can't bring himself to destroy it, because obviously he spent so long training to become a Jedi. He dedicated so much of his life to it that he just can't bring himself to do it. Well, Yoda doesn't have a problem with it. He's able to bring down a lightning bolt and set it alight. Now, that was a bit weird. I'm like, hold on, wait a minute. They can do this? Force ghosts can literally affect the world around them even though they're dead. So, what? Can Obi-Wan do that? Can Qui-Gon do that? Don't know whether he's actually learned how to be a Force ghost, but okay. I mean, can Anakin do that? He's extremely powerful. Or that was a bit strange to me, I would say. But it was nice seeing Yoda again. He's even able... He has the stick that he walks around with, that we all know. He's able to use his stick to actually hit Luke over the head with it. Which again is weird, because I thought, wait a minute, you're a Force ghost. You shouldn't be able to interact with physical things. You shouldn't be able to do that. And yet he's able to hit Luke over the head. He's able to summon lightning bolts. That was strange, but yet cool at the same time. Now we go on to DJ, who was betrayed by, oh, what's his name? I think it's Walking Phoenix, I believe his name is. Might be wrong. What's his name? Oh no, one with Walking Phoenix. What the hell am I talking about? Benicio del Toro. That's his name. What the? I think about something completely different. But Benicio del Toro. Which ties into Finn and the new character Rose's storyline in this movie. I'll get to that as a part of my negatives. So far I'm going through my positives right now. DJ, I didn't mind his character. It was very interesting, funny, particularly when Finn and Rose are in a jail cell and he's there. Surprisingly though, it is pretty convenient that they were put in the same cell as DJ, which is pretty interesting. But he offers to help them and they're like, no, it's fine, no problem. And they're just basically trying to ignore him. Think he's a bit crazy, a bit cuckoo, which he kind of looks like he is. But he just, okay, no problem, fine. Puts on his coat. He has that, I don't know why, he has his shoes hung around his neck, but whatever. He goes over to the door. He has this metal contraption. He slips it into the, what looks to be the access panel on the cell door, and it just opens. He just walks through, gives a quick wave, and he's gone. Then, when Finn and Rose are trying to get away now, he appears out of nowhere in a pretty cool looking ship, and he's basically being snarky about it. Oh, do you want to leave? So he gets there, he tells him that he can get them onto Snoke's ship and deactivate their... It was some sort of tracking that allows the First Order to track hyper speed travel, which throughout the entire movie was a situation that the rebels were in, where no matter how far they went, they couldn't get away from the First Order. They had minimal amount of fuel, so they had to be careful in terms of how much they used their hyperdrive, because if they use it too much, they would just run out of fuel and it'd just be sitting ducks for the Force Order to just annihilate. So that was pretty interesting. But the whole thing with DJ and the gambling city that it was. I was like, could have done without that, to be perfectly honest. Could have done without that. I would have liked to see more of Snoke, to be perfectly honest. More of Luke, to be perfectly honest. But he was an okay character. Then we've got General Hux. Now, this guy, he seems to be very headstrong. But there's a scene where one of the First Order's ships, which is called the Dreadnought, which is one of the biggest ships I've ever seen in my life in any movie. It was crazy. It looks like almost like the size of a few cities. It has these 2 cannons on the bottom of it that are firing at a rebel's base that is trying to flee. Now, General Hux, while this giant ship is under his command, he's not on that ship, he's on another ship. It looks like a Star Destroyer. He basically watches as the rebels blow up the Dreadnought ship. And as you can imagine, Snoke's not very too happy about that. So he appears on a hologram, just his head, which he seems to like doing. He doesn't like moving from his chair. Hux basically tries to act cool, calm, and collected to Snoke, and Snoke's not having it. He uses his force abilities to slam Hux into the floor. Drags him along the floor, maybe 5 to 10 meters, spins him around, and then proceeds to chastise him about his failures. That was pretty cool though, that scene, I must admit. Because General Hux acts all high and mighty quite a lot of the times, and then to see him being put in his place was really cool. But now we get over to our negatives. My negatives, I should say. And I have 3. 3 really big ones. Number 1, Snoke. Snoke is supposed to be the main villain of this trilogy. I don't think he's a very good villain, to be perfectly honest. All he's done is sit in a chair, right, and appear on holograms. It was nice seeing him in the flesh in this movie. The CGI was very well done, particularly when there was a close-up shot of his face. Looked very, very good. Justice League should be taking notes on this because the CGI on Snoke was very, very good. But I'm like, do something, man, please, do something. I mean, get up out of your chair and actually do something. We find out that he's the one who's been connecting Kylo to Rey, which to me, I'm like, wait a minute, so your power, one of your powers, is the ability to connect people from long distances. Now, if it was between Snoke and Kylo, I think that's a very useful ability to be able to communicate with Kylo so effectively and realistically when he's far away on missions or whatever. Fair enough. But to do that between Kylo and Rey, I'm like, that's not really an ability I would expect the main villain of a trilogy of Star Wars to be able to do. Aside from that, he gets killed by Kylo in an awesome way, I must admit, in a very awesome way. He basically gets the Darth Maul treatment, as I said earlier, but I'm assuming he's still alive somehow. I don't know how, but it is weird, very weird, that he's supposed to be this almighty power, but he, from what it seems like, he's dead until we find out in episode 9 he's alive somehow. But the main difference is with the Emperor, who we basically see him most of the time. He's in his chair, sitting down, chilling in his throne. You could feel the intimidation. You could feel the power from the guy whenever he was on screen. He was menacing. He was all-consuming, almighty. But with Snoke, you didn't really get that much from him. We know he's the leader of the First Order. We know he's the master of Kylo. But aside from that, that's it, really. That's it. So he was a disappointment. But he's not my biggest disappointment. My biggest disappointment was in Phasma. Now, when Force Awakens was coming out, Phasma was hyped up to be a character who would have a lot to do, let's say, in this Star Wars trilogy. Also, there was a book that came out recently, before The Last Jedi, where it was heavily implied that if you're not a Force user, you do not want to go up against Phasma. Phasma is supposedly the best of the best. She has a colleague who's supposed to be somewhat of her equal, so fair enough, but it's really her and no one else. And yet, for those of you who've seen the trailer, I'm pretty sure you have, where it's Finn and Phasma going at it. She has like a double-bladed sword of sorts, and he has I'm not too sure what you call it, but a shock trooper used it against Finn in The Force Awakens. I'm not too sure what you call the weapon though, but I expected Phasma to just own the guy, just completely kick his ass, even to the point where she would toy with him. But at the same time, the way it turned out, I'm like, no, that doesn't quite work for me. In the end, she kicks him down some sort of hole. I think it may be like a drop chute or whatever it's called. I'm not too sure what it is. And she turns around to take out Rose. This all while happening on the Snoke's main ship, which is even bigger than the Dreadnought earlier on in the movie, which is surprising as hell, but it is Snoke, so fair enough. As she's shooting her blaster at Rose and she's taking cover, she fails to notice that Finn is behind her. So he hits her over the head with his weapon, and so she's on the floor, she's trying to recover, and she turns around to look at him, and her left side of her face, particularly where her eye is, her shock to the helmet is broken. Similarly in the way that Darth Vader's is when he's fighting Ahsoka in the Star Wars Rebels movie. Star Wars Rebels TV show. And then the ground where she's laying begins to fall away, and she falls into fire, basically. She's been a disappointment as far as I'm concerned. She's been a real disappointment. I expected her to be someone who is very active in the First Order, where if Snoke wants her, like say for example Snoke wants to go to a particular planet to find something, he would send Phasma, go over there, do this, go. But we've never seen her do much of anything, which is disappointing. The hype that she received in the book was tremendous, but yet in the movie she hasn't really done much of anything. And she gave up pretty easy in The Force Awakens when she was being held hostage. Then she didn't lose the Finn necessarily in the fight that she had with him, but at the same time it's like, you're not living up to my expectations, lady. Not at all. Then we get to Finn and Rose, who's a new character's story. in the movie storyline. Honestly, I could have done without the whole gambling scene as far as I'm concerned. The only thing that I was okay with was the kids that we saw in what appeared to be like stables for a particular species of animals that were being used, sort of like how greyhounds are used nowadays in the greyhound racing. These creatures were being used in the same way, or horse racing as well. Their storyline, the storyline had some funny moments, but overall I didn't really care too much about it, to be perfectly honest. Finn's story in general, not too bothered about it, to be perfectly honest. Overall, I could have done without it, to be perfectly honest. I really could have. But one of the things I think I've forgotten, a particular character, is Poe. And he is a positive, so I do apologise for that. But Poe, I really enjoyed Poe as a character. He's stubborn. He's insubordinate. We see in the movie he gets demoted, I think from commander to captain by Leia. For disobeying her direct orders. Granted, he was able to accomplish his mission, but at the same time, in doing so, cost the rebels even more people than possibly it would have if he just retreated. But overall, I did like him as a character. He was very interesting. He showed he was willing to do what was necessary to win, which, considering the situations that they're under, is understandable. But throughout the entire movie, it's highly suggested that you don't need to be a descendant of someone who is already a Force wielder. Like, for example, Rey, we find out that Rey's parents are basically nobodies. They sold her for drinking money, and Kylo even mentions that they have graves in the desert somewhere. So I was thinking that she maybe was a Kenobi. Well, Obi-Wan Kenobi is my favourite character in Star Wars, so having her be his daughter or some sort of descendant from him, I thought would have been pretty cool. But I'm fine with what they went with. And then we see near the end of the movie, the kid who we see Rose give her her rebel ring to. We found out he's a Force wielder because he goes out. He looked like he was playing with his friends. He goes out and he's going to sweep the floor. So he walks up to his broom and he basically puts his hand out, and you see the broom just move over to his hand and grabs it. So you clearly see that he force pulls the broom into his hand and he starts sweeping. So it shows that you don't have to be a descendant from a Force wielder in order to be a Force user. It can be anyone. That was very interesting. It was cool to see. And the whole way that this series seems to be going, there doesn't seem to be any more emphasis on the Sith and Jedi anymore. It just seems to be good and bad. Some people use the dark side of the Force, some people use the good side, and it's just basically picking a side, which side you choose, not necessarily whether you're going to be a Jedi or Sith. That's the end of my review. Ultimately, I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was very good. Overall, I gave it 8.5 out of 10. I definitely think it's better than Force Awakens. Really enjoyed it. Luke was awesome. I really enjoyed him as a character. And overall, I really enjoyed it. Can't wait for episode 9. Iffy on the Han Solo movie, to be perfectly honest. But overall, really enjoyed it. Really fun. Definitely worth going out and checking out if you haven't seen already. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to go up to date with my latest information, please follow me on Twitter, Facebook and Discord. Links to all three are in the description box. Aside from that, please don't forget to hit that like button, share, comment and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching. Hope to see you again on my next video. Latest.